I cannot believe that we're already in the back half of 2024.
Are you kidding me?
But here we are. Before you know it, the calendar will be turning again, and that means we are already getting ready for 2025 conferences, and one that I'm personally very excited to attend, again, is the Insights EDU Conference. If you care at all about growing enrollment and building a student-centered higher ed experience, you really should be at this conference. Registration is now open, so secure your spot while early bird pricing is still available. Visit insightsedu.com for more information and to register. That's visit insightsedu.com for more information and to register.
Hey everybody, this is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience, and today we are extremely excited to announce our paid subscription service. By subscribing today, you will get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content. That's right, original content and invites to special events, all while helping to sustain EdUp. To become a subscriber, go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and subscribe to our free email newsletter to learn how you can get access. Again, go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. My name is Dr. Michelle Cantu-Wilson, and I'm your host today. I'm the Vice President of Workforce and Education at Outreach Strategists in Houston, and I'm a trustee at San Jacinto College. I'm filling in today, as I sometimes do, for the amazing, incredible, and world-famous Dr. Joe Sallustio. If you're tuning in today, it's because you're as eager to hear this episode as I am to record it. And so I'd like to make sure that you understand that you're listening to the most well-known and successful higher education podcast in the world. No other show has released as many episodes. No other show can boast an entire College President series with over 270 conversations with higher ed CEOs. No other higher ed podcast producer and associated talent can say that they've crossed mediums and written a book based on the information and interviews collected over the course of the show. Make sure and look up Commencement, the Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education. That's the book. And finally, no other podcast can say it has created as many higher ed spinoffs as this one. Check out the website to see the entire EdUp network. Okay, let's get to the show. I'll introduce my very special guest co-host. Dr. Brenda Hellier is the Chancellor at San Jacinto College and the 5th Chancellor in the institution's history. San Jacinto College is recognized as a top 10 college by the Aspen Institute's Community College Excellence Program. Prior to serving as our distinguished and universally well-liked leader, she was the Executive Vice President for Resource Development and the Executive Vice Chancellor for Fiscal Affairs. I worked for her for nearly 10 years, and I am now so proud to work with her on the board. Dr. Hellier, it's such a pleasure to have you with us today. Please say hello to our audience.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm delighted to be here. And to the audience, we're going to have a great show today.
Thank you. And now it is my distinct honor to introduce our guest. Many of you know him, and you very naturally respect him. Many of you have worked directly for him. If you've been in higher ed in Texas, we are speaking to none other than Dr. Harrison Keller, who has served as the Commissioner and CEO of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, and who recently made an exciting announcement about a new turn in his career. I will let him share. Welcome, Dr. Keller.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. And as you alluded to, I've been Commissioner of Higher Education for about the past 5 years, and looking forward to becoming the next president of the University of North Texas starting August 1st.
Congratulations. If Joe was here, he would hit the applause button on his podcast machine. I don't have that, so y'all just imagine it. I love UNT. I'm very closely connected to it because of former students from San Jac who went there. I know that you're going to do an outstanding job, and we are thrilled to have you as our guest and to watch your journey. We're going to kick off the show as we do with everyone, which is by asking this question: who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it? And you are free to engage as you see fit.
So I am sixth generation Texan. I'm a dad to three teenagers. I've had the privilege over the last more than 25 years of working on almost every aspect of public and higher education budget and policy in the state of Texas. Worked in the legislature, was an administrator and a faculty member at the University of Texas for several years. And for me, the opportunity to serve as commissioner for the last nearly 5 years has been exciting culmination of the work that I've participated in over the course of my career. Now, why I do it is I would point to the fact that both my parents were school teachers, and I grew up in what we in Texas call a property poor farming community out in West Texas. So I appreciate how education's transformed my life. And I would say actually some of the struggles that I had going from my high school out in West Texas to the honors program at my university really stuck with me. And so both my parents were teachers. I had great faculty mentors. But we take for granted that students are going to have a bumpy transition. The expectations are going to be different when you go from high school to higher education. I think that that's a problem we should eradicate as if it were a disease. And so a lot of the work that I've had the opportunity to participate in over the last several years at the Capitol and in state policymaking and working in partnership with great higher education leaders like Brenda Hellier has been about streamlining those transitions for students from high school into higher education, from community colleges into the universities, and ultimately into the workforce.
Thank you
Commissioner,
so much.
yes, Commissioner, we have been able to work together very closely. And over these last 5 years in your role as leading the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, there's been some tremendous accomplishments. And I look at the relationships that you have across the aisle and just really throughout the entire state. And when I heard you were leaving this role, that was one of my greatest fears, is because you've done so much for higher education, and how do we keep that momentum going? But my question is, what are your top 3 accomplishments that you feel from your work at the coordinating board over these last 5 years?
Well, thank you, Brenda. You're very kind, and you've been an amazing partner every step of the way. It's important to have people who you can call, who give you candid feedback and can tell you when you have a bad idea. And Brenda here is one of the best at telling me when I have a bad idea, who I have on speed dial.
It was very few times. So.
But she didn't say none.
He was relative. He was relative. Yeah. So we have been on an incredible journey. And so some of the highlights, there have been a lot of highlights over the last several years. And things that were unexpected. I mean, I only had 4 or 5 months on the job as commissioner before we were suddenly facing a global pandemic, and we had to. The job was very different than I thought that I had signed up for. So despite all the challenges, though, we have made a lot of progress. So three of them that I would highlight is, first, we updated the state strategic plan for higher education, and I'm proud of the work that went into our Building a Talent Strong Texas plan. We engaged hundreds of higher education K-12 leaders across the state, community leaders. We polled the Texas public. We talked to employers. We distilled all of the feedback that we've gotten into a bold new plan for Texas higher education. So we expanded the scope of our goals to include our entire working age population. And we were the first state to condition our goals for higher education on the value of credentials in our Texas economy. So we said we don't want to just make up credentials, claim that we're making progress. We only want to count those credentials that are credentials of value because of the kind of earnings that students have. And also, we need to pay attention to how much debt students have, that they have more debt than they should for the kind of credentials that they're earning. And then we brought the research and development mission back into our state plans for higher education. It was not part of the previous plan. But if we're going to be competitive as a state, we've got to compete in terms of our talent pipeline, and we've got to compete on the frontiers of knowledge, information, and technology. So our plan was incredibly important for guiding other work that we've done at the agency. And it's also become a model for the nation in conditioning those goals and focusing our attention around credentials of value. Second thing I'd highlight is our work on data infrastructure. So one of the reasons I was interested in taking this job is because we have incredible educational and workforce data in Texas. But when I stepped into the role, it was really hard to get at that data to be able to work with it. We literally had a closet that you could be locked in at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to be able to work with this incredibly rich data. So over these last few years, because of commitments of stimulus funds by the governor and legislative leadership, and then the legislature really got behind our vision for making data more accessible, more actionable, we've completely modernized our infrastructure for educational and workforce data. It's all in the cloud. It's more secure. It's easier to be able to work with that data. We're powering new public dashboards you can see on our website that include new dashboards that illustrate what our Texas talent pipeline looks like from middle school all the way through higher education. And increasingly, there'll be more and more data there publicly. But what I'm even more excited about is that we're providing privilege reports directly to the institution. So we've worked closely with more than 50 of our institutions to design new dashboards. So at the program level, institutions can see, here's what enrollments and completions look like. Here's what the profile of transfer student classes looks like. And they can also get into what the earnings outcomes are like by program and what the debt profiles are like for students. So again, we have incredibly rich data, but remember, most of our Texas higher education institutions are small, and they haven't had access to this kind of data before. So we can reset the baseline for what kind of actionable intelligence is available across our institutions. And our smallest community colleges are able to have a good sense of sort of what's happening in the economy and what's happening in the outcomes for their students. The last thing that I'd highlight that's been an incredible project, and it's got a lot of attention, is our work on community college finance. So we completely overhauled the community college finance system. This was my other full-time job for about 2 years.
You know that I'd like to mention just briefly that it made my entire dissertation irrelevant because it was on the past funding formula, but I was excited for the developments. Happy to be irrelevant.
Sadly, many dissertations are irrelevant after their publication.
That could be a whole nother podcast, right?
That would be. It's really the process as much as the findings. But so we used to fund community colleges just based on seat time. The community colleges would literally be penalized for streamlining their programs. I was talking to one community college president who told me that he had reduced the time to completion and the excess credit hours that the students had been taking, and it literally lost $3 million in state funding because that's how the old system worked. So now we have a system that is one of the purest outcomes-based systems in the country. So about 95% of the state formula funding for community colleges is through a new outcomes-based formula for production of credentials of value with more and high-demand fields for students who transfer if they have or they hit 15 hours in a structured co-enrollment program, and also for students who hit 15 hours of dual credit or dual enrollment courses in high school. But those courses have to apply to academic or workforce credentials. So we're not just encouraging random course taking. That these need to be applicable to students' pathway. all that is adjusted where we recognize there are students who are going to cost more to be able to get similar outcomes. So if you have a student who's from a low-income background, a student who wasn't college ready when they enrolled, and our biggest adjustments are for adult learners.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to be competitive as a state if we don't reskill and upskill our incumbent workforce. And so that's recognized in the new community college finance system. And then we've also stabilized our funding for our smaller and property poor community colleges across the state.
Yes.
What we're seeing in the data, if we had not had stimulus funds available to the colleges, and if we had
Mm-hmm.
not made these changes in our state finance system, I would not be surprised if we had 10 or 12 small community colleges that would really be in dire straits right now. And we were able to stabilize that funding for
Mm-hmm.
our smaller colleges. This was really historic change, and that's gotten a lot of attention. We've hosted delegations from a dozen other states at the
Mm-hmm.
coordinating board that have come to learn about it. But what I have told everybody is so that's a story about policy innovation, but it's really a story about policy implementation.
Mm-hmm.
We would not be able to move so far and so fast if we weren't able to work in very, very close partnership with community college leaders across the state and with the Association of Community Colleges on the design of the system, on how we put the rules together, on collecting new kinds of data that we've never collected before, and having that actually drive resources to the college. So we made the decision together not to spend a year planning, but to go immediately into implementation. And within a few weeks of the governor's signature on that bill, we had emergency rules in place. We were into implementation. So we are going to be in full implementation as the next legislature comes in to session this next time. And we have tremendous momentum across our community college with this new outcomes-based dynamic funding formula.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been a lot of exciting moments over the last few years, but our new plan, our work on data infrastructure, and our community college finance work, those have really stood out for me as some of the best things I've ever been able to work on in my career.
Mm-hmm. From the inside of higher ed, as we are, I think it's wonderful that we were able to stabilize, like you said, the small colleges. I went to Ranger College, and that's a very small college, and it really does serve the community. It's a very important institution. And so it makes me happy to know that even through the pandemic, we were able to provide the support needed and kind of have a pause to look at the future of the workforce. So that's an internal thing. From an external thing, just being a former first generation student and, having the issues of transitioning from high school to college, like you mentioned, what I observe in the plans that have been developed are two things. One, being actionable the way that industry is and pivoting quickly and kind of flipping the narrative of, higher ed being a slow moving machine, flipping that on its head in doing the three things that you just talked about. And then the other side of it is the messaging of inclusivity and making sure that we're not just looking at, those traditional credentials that we have always used to measure success in this world. The idea that you mentioned that we're not leaving out the adult learner, that we are looking at credentials of value, that means, micro-credentials or competency-based learning. I think we can't say it loud enough or frequently enough in Texas that we're paying attention to the workforce in a way that we never have before.
Sure. I think that's a really important point. So when we say credentials of value, we don't just mean traditional degrees and certificates. Those can be short-term workforce credentials.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, starting this fall, even what we call third-party credentials, like the Google Career Certificates, for example, become fundable credentials. Students can take the Google Data Analytics Certificate through their community college, and the value of those credentials is recognized. And we see a number of community colleges that are embedding those into their programs. That enhances value for students. It enhances value for employers. They know which skills they can count on. To your point about how nimble the system or not, I think the cartoon version of higher education is of it is of this sort of slow moving behemoth. my experience, especially when it comes to community colleges, is that that's
Yes,
not true. That
I agree.
I think I think important to call out that, that I think the community, what I've seen in community colleges, especially on the workforce programs, is they're much more nimble than they get credit for.
Mhm.
But the state has literally never gotten behind them. So the state has literally never provided funding for short-term workforce credentials
Mhm.
the way that we are in House Bill 8. We never even collected data on some of these credentials. Another thing that we did in our work on community college finance is we dramatically expanded access to students' financial aid. So it's on
Mhm.
par with the percentage of eligible students we fund at the universities. But we went even farther than that because we also changed the rules so that students in these short-term workforce programs can be eligible for state financial aid. And
Excellent.
so we've removed regulatory barriers, tried to clear the brush there. We've tried to remove financial barriers, try to get behind the innovators in the colleges. So they're no longer penalized for their student success work, but also so we could accelerate the work that they're doing with employers and in workforce education. So
Mhm.
uh, I was just talking to a community college president the other day. He told me their plan is to double their workforce education programs over the next year.
Wow.
That's incredibly exciting. And but that's exactly what we envision with House Bill 8 is we need to get
Mhm.
behind the colleges. We need to align the incentives so that students are going to have the opportunities they need to get the kind of credentials, the kind of skills they need to be able to be competitive, and employers need to be able to count on having that educated workforce in Texas so we can remain competitive in the future.
And commissioners, we were going through all the details around the new funding model. It was really critical that we were taking care of all students across Texas. And so you built in some components, making sure that the small institutions also were going to have additional capabilities. Can you talk about the capacity building that you built into there and the shared services components?
Well, so one of the things that we did just in process, I'll talk about that for a little bit, that was important is as we got into our work on community college finance, pretty clearly, one of the things that came out is that the cost environment's pretty dramatically different if we're talking about Ranger College versus if we're talking about San Jacinto College or Austin Community College or
Mhm.
one of our other large colleges. So we actually developed a whole strand of work within the community college finance project in partnership with philanthropy and some national experts, where we did a deeper dive and regional listening tours and trying to understand the cost environments for our smaller colleges and and that was really important for shaping that component of the system so that we would equalize some of the funding for instruction and operations, make sure all of our colleges had a base level of funding for instruction and operations. That's a relatively small part of the system overall, but for some of these small colleges, it doubled their state funding overnight. And
Excellent.
and then it becomes much more stable over
Mhm.
time, that it gives them a firmer foundation that they can work from. And then the way that the system is dynamic now, every college is funded on their actual outcomes they produce starting this next year. In fiscal year 25, it'll be the better of your performance for fiscal year 2025 or the average of your performance for 25, 24, and 23.
Mhm.
So the colleges are funded for their actual performance in each given year. And there's a settle up process at the back end of that. So the system becomes much more dynamic. So as Brent Hellier and our colleagues work with employers, for example, to understand here's what the workforce needs are. We can stand up new certificate programs. Then they can count on the state funding being there to help sustain those efforts over time. That's a pretty fundamental change in how we fund
Mhm.
community colleges to shift to a dynamic system like that.
Mhm. I was thinking, you had university experience prior to becoming the commissioner, and then You worked and learned, I think, probably more than you ever imagined was possible about community colleges. And now you're shifting back to the university mindset. What do you think has changed in your mind regarding our two-year institutions and the landscape of how the workforce can develop through the partnerships that you've established in the last 5 years?
Calling all higher ed marketing and enrollment management professionals. Hear, hear. The Insights EDU conference is back. This is your chance to level up your marketing and enrollment management strategies, and the EdUp Experience podcast will be there once again. Join us at the Ritz-Carlton, New Orleans, February 12th through 14th for an unforgettable conference. Registration is now open with early bird pricing.
Outstanding.
Hey everybody, this is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. Are you enjoying the conversation so far? Good, I hope so. Did you know that you can actually hear this conversation early before anybody else and ad-free, so you don't have to hear my voice during these ads? And did you also know that you could get extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content? That's right, original content and invites to special events, all while helping to sustain EdUp? Well, if you didn't know, now you know. So go to edupexperience.com, that's EDUP experience.com, and become a subscriber today. First, you got to sign up to our free email newsletter, and then you'll find out how to become a subscriber. Again, go to edupexperience.com.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm really shifting to a university mindset or back and forth that way. I mean, I'm excited about the potential at the University of North Texas. I have to say, though, one of the things that I've always believed, and that's been an important part of my work when I was at UT Austin or as commissioner, or now as I go back onto a campus at UNT, is if you're going to work at scale, you've got to work in partnership. So what traditionally higher education institutions, colleges and universities tend to operate like little city states and compete with each other. Now, the problem is that our workforce needs are growing at an incredibly fast and accelerating rate, and they're moving in the direction of needing more education, more credentials than ever before. We need to take fundamental responsibility for our talent problems in our regions and across the state. The only way that we can do this and be able to meet the needs, be able to work at scale, is we've got to break down traditional barriers within our institutions, disciplinary barriers, but we've got to break down barriers across institutions and be willing to work in partnership with community colleges, with our school districts, and in much closer partnership with employers than ever before. So, so as I'm stepping into this new role, that's still where I come from. That's still what I believe. And what I've seen again and again is that if you're going to have impact at scale, the way that you have impact at scale is you work through strategic partnerships with other committed partners. And I'm looking forward to working closely with, in particular, with the community college leaders up in the DFW region. Of course, I've gotten to know all of them fairly well over these past few years, and there's some excellent community college leaders. I'm going to be coming back around to Brenda Hellier, though, with some ideas about how I'd like to partner with all of the community colleges across the state of Texas. Because, again, we need to take fundamental responsibility as public higher education leaders for our talent problems in Texas. And the only way we can meet these needs is if we work in partnership.
Excellent.
So, Commissioner, these last 2 months, your announcement that you were leaving the coordinating board came out about June 7th. And I'm just curious, what have these last 2 months of wrapping up felt like? What have you been doing? And what are those things that you feel kind of undone that you want to make sure will move forward?
So these last couple of months have been incredibly incredibly busy. We were able to take a little time as a family to take a vacation recently, which was great because my son is heading off to college in the fall. And so he's going off to college and I'm going off to college. I suppose we'll both be freshmen the same year, although he'll be at Texas A&M and I'll be at University of North Texas. So there's so much we've been able to accomplish together over these last several years. But even on the issues that I mentioned, so for example, on our data infrastructure, there's still more work to be done with the colleges. A lot of this work has been driven by the feedback we've gotten from the colleges. For example, like the community colleges have asked for the agency to provide more data on labor market outcomes and on how workforce needs are changing. And so there's still more work to be done there, especially to get a sense, to try to get a better sense of like how workforce needs are changing in terms of the demand for different kinds of credentials versus our supply. So there's still a lot more work to be done there. It's important that we not take our foot off the gas pedal on the community college finance work. We have incredible momentum and a dynamic community college finance system. But Sam Houston said, no Texan can be safe in their beds when the Texas legislature is in session, right? So, and the legislature will be back in session in January. And we need to make sure that we keep the momentum going and that the funding is there, right, to continue making progress. I think we need to let the system develop, not pull the rug out from under the colleges, and where the colleges have stepped up and delivered, that might mean that the legislature needs to make a supplemental appropriation to make good on the system. And I, of course, hope that they will do that. I would certainly that work is never really finished, right? To make sure that we stay the course and that we continue making progress. There's also a lot more work that we need to do around some of our critical workforce needs, where we've just gotten started on some work recently with a commission that Governor Abbott established around our nursing education to better understand our nursing workforce needs. That's our number one shortage in Texas. And we need to think outside the box, be more creative across and within our institutions and how we meet those needs. We've got similar issues around our teaching workforce where we need to develop new kinds of partnerships with school districts and across our 2-year and 4-year institutions to meet those needs. So there's no shortage of projects. There's no shortage of issues that we need to continue to work on. I am looking forward to continue to work on those issues, but in a different role at the University of North Texas.
With the data changes that we've made so rapidly as a state, it seems like staying the course wouldn't be such a huge undertaking. It just matters that we pay close attention to the real-time data that we have and not the autopsy data that we're always, historically known for looking at. And I appreciate your sense of advocacy in making sure that, our state leaders know that it does take a concerted effort and a sustained effort to determine, the success pathway. So that's exciting.
Just to illustrate, so where we've been is, so even on data submission, so we have incredibly rich data, but the data would be submitted, say, once a year from the colleges, and then we'd have some poor soul at the agency who would spend a couple of weeks going through the files and identifying potential errors and getting in touch with the institutions, and then there'd be a lot of back and forth. And over a period of some months, then you get a data set that's error-free, and then eventually a final certified data set and reports that are presented that could be at least a year old.
Yes.
So you have unbelievable data, but is it actionable intelligence? So where we are now is we're standing up these new hubs and completely re-architecting how data comes into the agency. So when Sanjak submits data to the coordinating board, where we can immediately identify errors, they can correct those errors right away.
Mhm.
And then where we're going is for the data to be able to ripple through these new privileged reports and dashboards. For example, like with the colleges, we're working on one set of reports specifically related to community college finance.
Mm.
And so in real time, as enrollments change, the colleges will be able to see here's what the implications could be for your funding, or here's what the patterns look like in your student outcomes, and where the colleges will be able to compare that with, okay, is this idiosyncratic to my college, or is this something we're seeing at colleges across the state, or are universities also seeing similar things? That's a pretty fundamental shift from using data more with a regulatory mindset to
Mm.
using data more to drive improvement and to inform decisions within the institutions.
So, Commissioner, this funding model for the community colleges, it was a transformational change, and you're right, it was historic. I guess I'm curious, do you see any similar changes coming for the universities in the future for the state funding model?
Well, I think a number of the university leaders have looked at the community college finance model, and just to contrast, like on the university side, they're still funding seat time. You're funded on your semester credit hour generation. So students who are more successful in their programs take they take fewer excess courses, they graduate faster. That means the state penalizes them the way that we used to penalize the community colleges. And then they look over at the community college finance system where there are incentives to innovate, where there are incentives to streamline students' progress to credential, where there's recognition of the additional costs of getting students from diverse backgrounds to achieve the outcomes that the state needs, giving students a better return on their investment. There are incentives for partnerships in that are built into the community college finance system, for incentives for co-enrollment partnerships with universities, and for the institutions to be creative about how they grant transfer credit or grant credit for those like Grow with Google certificates or military service or other things. So I think there's some due jealousy now with the university for where the community colleges are, because the community colleges have a 21st century finance system that has become a model for the nation, and the universities are still funded on a very traditional inputs-based model.
Mhm. Okay. Um, you mentioned earlier, I'm going to pivot a little bit, but you mentioned when we started that there were some challenges associated with your transition from high school to college. And I just kind of want to give you some space to share what that looked like and what that felt like and why it's relevant today to the work that you're about to undertake as a university president.
So, okay, so I mentioned that both my parents were school teachers. My dad was a school teacher up until the day he died. And
Wow.
so I certainly came from a family that valued education. And I was a good student. Um, but I realized pretty quickly, especially when I was in high school, the kinds of opportunities that were available in my high school compared to some other high schools, especially in the larger urban areas, were pretty different. So I ran out of math to take after my junior year of high school. We
Oh my
didn't have,
goodness.
we didn't have dual credit at the time. We didn't have AP courses in my high school. So when I got off I was an undergraduate at University of Notre Dame, and then when I got off to Notre Dame, first of all, I had no idea what real winter was like. But the
Oh.
other thing is, so all of a sudden, I'm sitting in honors calculus next to kids who had had 2 years of AP calculus courses. It took me about 3 semesters to recalibrate, and that was with a ton of support from my family, a ton of support from faculty members. Um, it was still painful with a lot of suffering. Now it's Notre Dame, so I think I probably got some some extra credit for suffering that
Mhm.
year. But
But you said 3 semesters to recalibrate. Our students don't have 3 semesters.
That's right. That's right. And in fact, so this stuck with me, right? And so a couple of things when I got to UT Austin, I was a vice provost, and for a while I had our Center for Teaching and Learning in my portfolio. We did some analyses to support the institution where we were looking at the effects of high schools on student GPAs, and we could see significant differences into the junior year. Now, to your point, if you're thinking about how much time do students have to get on track while they're now the stakes are high, they're paying tuition, they're taking out debt. If you're interested in going to medical school, for example, medical schools have become hyper competitive. You can't afford 3 semesters to recalibrate. So this stuck with me. And so I actually founded a program with support from the legislature when I was at UT Austin, because my idea was to say, well, why don't we engage students earlier in the pipeline and give them a chance to recalibrate when the stakes are still low, while they're still in high school. So I founded a dual enrollment program called On-Ramps. And so the idea is you have a rigorous high school course that the students would take, where we partnered with high schools, we trained and supported the high school teachers, and then simultaneously the students would also enroll in an online course taught directly by our faculty at UT Austin. And they were graded just like the kinds of grades you get if you were a student on campus at UT. And sometimes you get an A from your high school teacher in the high school course, and you get a C in your college course. But you would get feedback and the opportunity to recalibrate. We started with about 166 students in one computer science class. And by the time I left UT, we were serving nearly 40,000 students across the state, across a number of different courses, and in partnership with other universities. And even we even did some work in partnership with Houston Community College in particular. That's a program that's continued at UT after I left, and I'm a firm believer in high quality dual enrollment, dual credit experiences for students, because it gives them that opportunity to not just earn credits and accelerate their programs, but to recalibrate and make sure that they're ready for the expectations of college that are different from traditional high school expectations. So I've worked on a number of different budget and policy issues since then, but that continues to be a theme for me, that we need to engage talented students earlier in the pipeline, provide them with support and mentoring so that they know and we know they're ready to do the next thing when they step on our campuses. This is something we're continuing to look at now. Right now I'm co-chairing a commission for the American Academy of Arts and Sciences on opportunity after high school. And so we're looking across the country at what are some of the strongest programs and strongest examples there that help equip students for their next educational or employment opportunities.
Excellent. Dr. Heller, do you have one last question before we start to move to our last 2 questions of the show?
So, Commissioner, in a few days, we're going to be calling you President, Keller. And so tell us, what got you so excited about UNT and making this big transition?
So I'd gotten to know the folks at UNT, especially in my work as commissioner. Over these last few years, I've been on campus multiple times. They've been a great partner in a number of initiatives that we've been involved in. For example, there's an initiative that we founded here at the coordinating board, working in partnership with the governor and legislative leadership, called the Texas Leadership Scholars for students from who are high achieving students from low income backgrounds. We now have hundreds of students across all our universities who get mentoring and support, and also their room and board covered by the state as part of that program. and UNT had stepped up and was willing to be the hub to help support implementation of that program across the state. So UNT is our third largest university in Texas. It's been our fastest growing university in Texas. Of course, it's in DFW. That's been our fastest growing region, fastest growing economy in the state of Texas. And so there are a lot of advantages there when you look at those kinds of metrics. But what was especially striking to me, what I was especially excited about, is when I talked to the chancellor, when I talked to the board at UNT, when I talked to faculty leaders who I know. There's a commitment to students and an openness to innovation that frankly, you just don't see many places. And so for me, this is a once in a career opportunity to lead an institution that's really committed to being on the vanguard of part of a new generation of universities that take fundamental responsibility for solving talent problems and for driving economic opportunity for that region and for the state. And so I'm thrilled. I'm excited about this opportunity, but it is bittersweet for me to step down as commissioner, because I have loved the work, and I'm deeply grateful to the governor and to our board for the opportunity, and I'll miss working in partnership with higher education leaders like Brenda Hellier across the state. We've made a lot of progress through our partnerships together.
Yeah, I just need to know you're not changing your cell phone, right? Because I've got you.
Oh no, and I still got you on speed dial too.
Okay, good. I just needed to make sure we went public here. All right.
The most important things get worked out on this podcast, let me tell you all. Before we move to the last two questions, I just wanted to highlight some things for our listeners, especially for those people who are outside of Texas who are scribbling away right now furiously and trying to make note of the innovation and think about doing things in their own communities. Some of the things that I'm taking away is this. So the first one is the quote, if you're going to work at scale, you've got to work in strategic partnership. I appreciate you saying that. I think that's something that we have to think about constantly. The second thing that I'm taking away is the idea of regional responsibility. I think you've said that over and over as workforce and education experts and leaders, we have to take responsibility for our communities and for making sure that we have a talent-ready workforce pipeline in Texas. The next thing is the idea that a personal educational experience can fuel a statewide initiative. Your experience as a student was personal. It was something you felt deeply, something your family experienced with you, and something that you decided to act on as a professional. And that leads me to the last point, which is a life of service is one well lived. I think we're going to continue to see amazing things come from the body of work that you have undertaken in your career, and to see how you're going to make that regional responsibility kind of resonate in North Texas. The last two questions are pretty simple. The first one is there anything that we've missed that you want to make sure that our listeners hear? And then the final one is, what's the future of higher education, not just in Texas, but beyond?
So one thing we haven't talked about a lot today, we just haven't had the opportunity, that it could be a whole nother discussion.
Happy to do that.
Is well, there we go. Is how important it is to be able to also provide better information in the hands of students and their families. And that has been also a strategic priority for us, and we've made incredible progress. If you go to mytexasfuture.org, you'll see our one-stop advising portal that we've created in partnership with the institutions, and that's going to continue to build out. In fact, this is where we're integrating the new Apply Texas, our college application process for Texas, and in the next couple of months, we'll have a direct admission option for students.
Excellent.
Where students can automatically get offers of admission to multiple Texas institutions and have a clear line of sight to how those educational opportunities could help prepare them for good jobs in Texas. I mean, so I think that it's important that the listeners understand that the way that we're approaching this work in Texas, it's not just about higher education. In fact, I'm not sure our community college finance bill would have passed if it were just a higher education bill. This was a bill that was about jobs. This is a bill that is about the future of Texas that we want to live in. And so our focus hasn't just been on students earning more credentials. The focus has to be on expanding opportunities with credentials of real value students. And so that's one of the things that I'd really want to emphasize. So the future of higher education needs to be much better aligned with our changing workforce needs. We need to be much better attuned to the way that those employers' needs are changing. And when I talk to employers across the state, one of the things they've told me is that those workforce needs are changing faster than they expected, and in some cases faster than they understand, especially because of rapid advances in artificial intelligence. So there are things that they thought they might be able to automate someday that all of a sudden they're able to automate today or over the next few months. And this is creating enormous disruption, but also opportunities for creativity within our institutions, within industry. So the time is right for us to work in even closer partnership with employers to try to figure out how we equip students to be able to be competitive in the future, to be ready for good jobs, to be also able to lead healthy and productive lives with meaning and with purpose. And so the traditional models of higher education weren't designed to serve everyone. They weren't designed to, they really built on a model that was more about exclusivity. And still the way we think about higher education is founded on the ideas that, we'll evaluate how well you're doing by how many qualified students you're not serving. Well, we've got to get past that mindset in higher education in Texas. And again, we have a fundamental responsibility as public higher education leaders to our state, to our students, to our communities, to innovate a new kind of model for higher education. And so that's where I think higher education needs to go, is where we are educating many more people to much higher standards than we've ever envisioned or achieved before.
I'm in, definitely.
Wow, that was
well
great.
said. Dr. Heller, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to share?
Well, I would really just want to thank, and I'm going to say Harrison. Thank you, Harrison, for all your leadership and your friendship. And you've been a friend to me, but you've been a friend to so many across the state and really the country. I mean, I read the quote from the Chancellor of UNT, Michael Williams, and he said this. He goes, Harrison, it's his ability to lead, innovate, and partner both statewide and nationally that has helped transform Texas higher education and will have an invaluable impact on UNT. And it's an incredible quote. When I read it, I was like, yep, he got it, person right there. But you've impacted the entire country. So it's wonderful. And I was really honored to be on this podcast with you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your partnership. And folks might think I'm kidding about Brenda being really good at telling me when I have a bad idea, but she is. and you can see her fingerprints on so many aspects of our work as a result. So
Yes.
I'm deeply grateful.
I have learned both from working for her and working with her, once she starts asking questions, you better be on your toes because she knows exactly where she's going and what she's looking for. So thank you all both so much for a great conversation. Dr. Keller, we're excited for you. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and we hope to have you back. This is always an open offer. We wish you the best of luck in your new role. Go Mean Green. I'm a big fan. And Dr. Hellier, thank you so much for joining this conversation. It wouldn't have been the same without you. I think
Thank you.
the idea that we have these collegial relationships in higher education in Texas is something that I'm really, really proud of. And you just both illustrated that for our audience, both in Texas and beyond. So folks, thanks for joining us today. Remember to like, follow, and share the EdUp Experience podcast. Remember the amazing interviews that we have available for you. And as we say around here, my friends, you've just EdUp'd.
Higher education is evolving. And if you're in marketing and enrollment management, then you need to be at the Insights EDU conference.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Insights EDU 2025 is happening February 12 through 14 in New Orleans, Louisiana. This is your chance to explore the latest trends in higher education and discover new and innovative strategies to level up your program marketing and enrollment. Hear from some of the best speakers in the industry, from companies like Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, and more. Registration is now open, so secure your spot while early bird pricing is still available.
Hey everybody, this is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience. Did you enjoy that conversation? I hope you did. Did you know that you can actually hear this conversation early on and ad-free? And you can also hear extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content. That's right, original content and invites to special events, all while helping to sustain EdUp. Did you know that? Well, if you didn't know, now you know. To become a subscriber, go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com to subscribe to our free email newsletter to learn how you can get access. Again, that's edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com.